All right, welcome to the briefing meeting that precedes the June ordinary meeting. As is our normal custom, we'll go around the room and see if there's any conflicts of interest that need to be recorded. Councillor Dempsey.
Nil known at this time.
Councillor Trevor.
None known at this time.
Councillor Honour, you have one?
Yes, Mr Chairman, I've got G2, which is a purchase of block land. I've got K1 through to K6. K1 and K2. And they're in relation to open development that I have an outstanding contract with council on.
Would you be vacating the room for all of those? Okay, thank you. Councillor McPhee? Councillor Barnes?
No, I've had trouble accessing VCAN, but from the summary that sent out, I have no conflicts.
Councillor McLaughlin? Councillor Haberman, welcome.
Oh, sorry. No conflicts.
No conflicts.
It would have been excused had it been blue.
Yes, no conflicts.
Councillor Mitchell?
I have two conflicts, Mr CEO. K3, which is a request for extended completion date for building Bundaberg Region 2020 incentives, and 02, lease renewal, community lifestyle support, School Lane, Windermere. I'll be leaving the room for both.
For both, thank you. And Councillor Lemon? No conflicts. Okay, we'll move on to the first item, which is the organisational structure, which is my report. So councillors will be aware that Amanda Parfumi, the previous General Manager of Organisational Services, tendered her resignation a couple of months ago to take up a similar role at Redlands, which has given us the opportunity to look at a change to the structure. It results in two more direct reports to the CEO and a newly created position within the People and Culture area that we're nominally calling Director of Organisational Improvement. The change of structure is cost neutral. Obviously with Amanda's resignation, we no longer have a third General Manager role. And there'll be a couple of other appointments to roles once that structure is approved by the Council. The only position at this stage we'll be going to market for will be the newly created role of Director of Organisational Improvement. Happy to take any questions or any comments. Councillor McPhee. Correct. Yes, that'll be a new direct report to me. Any other questions, comments? No? All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is the finance report for the quarter. Thank you, Simon. Month, I should say.
Councillors.
Morning.
Financial summary as at the 1st of June. Rates and utility charges in the report reflect what we thought would approximate budget. However, just worth noting that the water read cycle for second half of the year has just been completed, and that the consumption is lower than what we had in the budget. So that'll result in about $1 million worth of revenue not being realised around the consumption. Obviously, drivers of that probably the recent wet weather has affected usage in that regard. Fees and charges continue to track above budget, and we expect that the actuals will exceed budget this year. Some of the drivers for that are outlined in the report. Similarly with interest revenue, we expect that will be higher than budget, both in terms of the cash balance and also the recent increases in investment rates. Grants as well, as outlined previously around the financial assistance grant, and also land will exceed budget with further sales to be realised this month, so that amount that's reflected in the report will increase again at the end of the year. Recurrent revenue, employee costs are above budget in terms of the operating activities outlined in the report, and that will be the case come end of year. However, it's worth noting that the overall employee costs for council are actually under budget. The reason for this is due to the delivery of the capital program. So whilst the report showing employee costs tracking higher than budget, the actual overall employee cost for council will be under budget this year. Materials and services are tracking lower than budget, and that will be the case come end of year. For the reasons outlined in the report and also in previous reports, a lot of it's linked to the delivery of the capital program. Finance costs and depreciation we expect to be in line with budget at this stage. So on the capital program, $53.7 million expended year to date. That's not delivery, that's purely what's hit the books. Also worth noting that the roads program will have a significant increase during the June month as a lot of those programs are rolled out. Any questions on the finance update?
Thanks, Simon. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Simon. The $1 million less revenue for water consumption, can I also assume that we've got less operational costs for the treatment of water that we would have had to supply?
That's something I can look at and bring back to councillors.
Any other?
Yes, sir. I confirm that there is a reduction in operating cost for the treatment, but it's not of the same scale as the reduction in revenue.
Thanks, John. Any other questions of Simon? No? Thanks, Simon. The next one is in relation to the sale of a block of land. Christine?
Good morning, councillors. Item G1 is in relation to the sale of 10 Heritage Drive at Childers. Council owns this parcel of land and has previously resolved to sell it as it is surplus to council's needs. The lot was previously offered for sale by auction, however the auction was not successful. Council had previously entered into a contract for the sale of this lot, but the buyer validly terminated the contract. The new offer that council has received is for market value. Therefore, the recommendation to council is that council rescind the resolution made previously in regard to the previous sale as far as it relates to lot 37, that council apply the exception contained in section 236 1A1 of the local government regulation to the disposal of that lot, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a contract and attend to all items to finalise that sale.
Thanks, Chris. Comments or questions?
The next item is item G2.
Thanks, Councillor Honour.
This item relates to the sale of Lot 9 at the Bundaberg Regional Aviation and Aerospace Precinct. Council has previously resolved to sell this lot as it is surplus to its needs, and the lot was previously offered by tender, but the tender was not successful in the sale. The lot and the offer that is presented to council is for market value, and again council had previously entered into a contract for the sale of this lot, but that contract was validly terminated by the buyer under the due diligence special condition. Therefore, the recommendation to council is that council rescind the resolution made in relation to the previous lot sale, and that council apply the exception contained in section 236 1A1 of the local government regulation to the disposal of the lot, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a contract with the buyer and attend to all items to finalise that sale.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions? No? All good. Thank you.
I'll be straight back out again. If K is the next one.
There's a few more. Councillors, the next item is G3, which relates to a lease renewal with Telstra for telecommunications equipment that is on Council's Moore Park Water Tower. Council is the freehold owner of the property where the Moore Park Water Tower is. Telstra currently have a lease over the property which is due to expire on the 31st of October 2022. Telstra has requested that that lease be renewed. Council's proposing a term of 3 years with a special condition allowing council to terminate, giving 6 months notice if council intends to decommission that water tower. However, termination of that lease cannot occur in the first 12 months. Rent will be at a gross market rent, and Telstra will be responsible for 100% of their services such as electricity. It's proposed that council apply the exception contained in section 2361C3 of the local government regulation, given that it's a renewal of a lease to an existing tenant, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a 3-year lease with Telstra for part of the land.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions?
The next item is G4, which is in relation to a lease renewal at 25 Key Street, Bundaberg. Council has a perpetual lease over this property, and council then subleases the property to the Department of Transport and Main Roads. DTMR currently have a lease over the property which is due to expire on the 31st of December 2022. DTMR have requested that their lease be renewed. It's proposed that the lease renewal is for a period of 5 years, with a special condition added to our standard lease terms, allowing either party to terminate the lease, giving 6 months notice to the other. Rent will be for market value, and DTMR will be responsible for 100% of their outgoings and services such as electricity. Council proposes to apply the exception contained in section 2361B1, given that the disposal is to a government agency, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a 5-year lease with the department for that land.
Thanks, Chris. Comments or questions?
Thank you.
All good, thank you. The next item is G5. Mitch and Anthony.
Everybody, just here today to seek endorsement from council to enter into a specialised supplier arrangement with Jack Taylor Group for the supply of Monday.com. Brief history was we've extended a specialised supplier arrangement to align with the contract end date, which is 9 July next month. We did run a market process earlier in the year, which saw one respondent. The issue with the market process was that the new pricing has come in over a tender amount. Unfortunately, we don't have time to run a tender, hence leaving this being the option today to enter into a specialised supply arrangement again. Also might be worth noting that given the fact that a market process was run and we only received one respondent, it would be likely that we'd still only receive one in a tender process.
Thanks, Mitch. Questions or comments? Councillor McPhee?
So, can you explain the difference between the process that was run and the tender process?
So there was an RFQ, given the current pricing arrangement was under 200,000 for the 3 years, and we approached vendors that are listed on the Monday.com website as partners via a vendor panel market process. A tender would be advertised, I guess, more openly.
So this has come back in over the amount that says that then we need to go to tender.
Yes.
And that's why it's coming in as a special.
Yep. Given the fact that we don't have time to run a tender before the end of the current specialised supply arrangement and contract. Yep.
We have known that it's been coming up to the so I'm just wondering why we haven't gone out with the tender earlier.
I'd like to give you a good answer to that, but market processes take time, I suppose.
Just to add to it, we're actually asking for an extension to 2025, and although Monday.com is embedded in the organisation, we are also looking at other options to do our project management across council that fits in more with our corporate planning.
So that Monday.com will continue to be used, but may not be to the extent it's currently being used with the number of users. And I think that was the issue, that once we've gone over a certain number of users, this put us into another contract agreement for 2 years. So we're looking at that. So this doesn't tie us into having to use Monday.com at this level going forward, but it gives us a time now to look at what the other options are.
Any other questions or comments? No? All good? Thanks, fellas. Another specialised supply arrangement. Anthony.
Yeah, so this is a request to extend the specialised supply agreement with SAI Global, who provide us with all of our Australian codes and standards. As in the report, we did have a previous supplier. They were more of a general business supplier, and they provide other legal advice, handbooks and safety gear, but they didn't have all the standards available that we require. The service we've had with SAI has been good, and we're looking for an extension of that to 2025.
Thanks, Anthony. Questions or comments? Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, question just relates to, that's an online service that you...
That's right, yeah. So we, Standards Australia, you can actually get onto their website and download standards one at a time, but this is actually a subscription service, which is an online service.
The reason I ask, that means everything's current and kept up to date. Yep, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? No? All good? Then we move into the planning section, K1. Councillor Honour's leaving the room for the next 5.
Actually, just out of abundance of caution, I'll leave the whole of K and come back at K1 as well.
Well, just to clarify, Mr Mayor, you'll need, prior to the ordinary meeting, you'll need to expand on that.
Exactly.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, welcome.
Councillors, item K1 refers to a request to apply previously approved Building Bundaberg Region 2020 incentives agreement to a changed but effectively new development and to then extend the completion date. This request relates to DA 522-2021-256.1, which was a development permit for hardware and trade supplies at 20 Joanna Boulevard. The approval that was granted on the 28th of June 2021 was for a 2,424 square metre commercial to host those facilities. Under the incentives program at the time, the development was approved to be incentivised at a 50% discount, subject to completion by the 30th of June 2022. Subsequent to that approval and the undertaking necessary paperwork to provide the incentives, the developer actually acquired additional land and undertook a change application. So not a minor change, but it was effectively a new development proposal that expanded the development over the adjoining land. So that new development more than doubled the gross floor area and was a substantially bigger development, as well as the hardware and trade. It had 3 additional tenancies, and that was approved on 10th of March this year. However, at the time, no request was made to change the infrastructure agreement. Inside SJC, the consultants acting on behalf of the owner have now written to the council seeking 2 things. Firstly, that the infrastructure agreement, the incentives, be applied to the new development to the extent that was previously approved, so not to the whole development, but to the original parameters of the incentivised original proposal. They're also then seeking an extension for 2 years to complete that development. Council, as I noted in the report, this changed development was lodged and approved post the closing of applications and for the Bundaberg Region 2020 Incentive Scheme, and under our current charter resolution and our projects of regional significance incentive scheme, commercial development is not eligible to be incentivised. So in saying that though, there is merit in my view that the discount could be provided to the extent that was originally approved. The development at its core is still the same as the one that Council originally agreed to incentivise, you know, it's a positive that the developer is taking the opportunity to build upon that original incentive and expand to create additional construction and further employment opportunities post-development. It's on this basis that I recommend to you that the original agreement be amended to allow for the discount to apply to the new development to the extent as detailed in the report, and that the extension of time be granted to the date requested.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions? No, all good. One down, 5 to go. No, he's out for a lot. Yep, that was my understanding.
Councillors, item K2 is a request to extend the completion date on a Building Bundaberg Region 2020 agreement for a development approval for multiple dwelling units and reconfiguring a lot at 126 to 128 Miller Street at Bergara. The incentives were approved on the 1st of July 2021, and they provide the incentives to the 15 units that are proposed. Because it's in the Bergara town centre area, it's eligible for a 100% discount. The owner of the site, through their consultants, have asked for that completion date to be extended for a period of 18 months to the 31st of December 2023. Although the infrastructure agreement does provide the ability for the CEO to make to decide an extension request, it's a precondition in that requirement that the development achieve substantial commencement, which in this case would mean that slabs had at least been poured for the units. The development hasn't achieved that, although substantial works have been undertaken to provide supporting infrastructure, including effective completion of the sewerage infrastructure and stormwater and roadworks that necessary to service the development are well underway. The owner, in making the request, has pointed to the difficulty, the delays that they've had in engaging appropriate contractors and consultants, and also the extended period of wet weather at the beginning of this year. Councillors, even though the developer hasn't made the test of substantial commencement under the infrastructure agreement, it is believed that they've met the intent of that requirement in that they have undertaken significant works and have committed to delivering the development. It's on this basis that it's recommended that the requested extension be granted.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions? No. Next one. Sorry, hang on. Councillor Mitchell's leaving for this one.
Councillors, item K3, continuing on a theme here, relates to a request to extend the completion date of a Building Bundaberg Region 2020 incentives agreement, this time being relating to a development at 30 Key Street, Bundaberg, being a development permit for multiple dwelling units and office. The incentives were originally approved in 2021, and being in the Bundaberg CBD area, the development was eligible for 100% discount. Under the terms of the infrastructure agreement, the development was required to be completed by the 14th of June of this year. The owner of the subject site has requested that the completion date be extended for a period of 12 months to the 14th of June 2023. And for the reasons I communicated in the previous report, this request is required to be brought to Council for consideration. In seeking the request, the owner has advised that extension is needed due to market conditions, and a copy of their request is attached to the report. Councillors, although the owner hasn't provided a detailed explanation of why they're seeking the extension, the current delays being experienced in the development industry, either through access to consultants, contractors and tradies, as well as building materials, is well known, and these would inevitably be causing delays to this proposal. On this basis, it's recommended that the requested extension to 14th of June 2023 be approved.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions on that one? No. We'll get Councillor Mitchell back.
Councillors, sorry, Councillor Mitchell. Councillors, item K4 relates to a request to extend the completion date for a Building Bundaberg Region 2020 Incentives Infrastructure Agreement relating to a development at 152 Esplanade Woodgate, which is a development permit for 9 multiple dwelling units, a cafe and a shop. Councillors, the infrastructure agreement was executed in 2021 and the development was required to be completed by 14th of June this year. To date, no works have commenced in relation to this development, although building approval has been obtained for the cafe/shop component, and a plumbing application is at the time of writing was with Council, awaiting on the proponent to make further applications for connection to our services. The requested completion date sought is 14th of June 2023. Again, the developer is pointing to the extended period of wet weather obtained, delays in obtaining the plumbing approval, and also the just noting that any extension grant, or the extension requested, is in line with extensions granted by the Planning Minister to development approvals more broadly. Excuse me. Councillors, despite having not achieved substantial commencement by the required dates, the developer has taken steps to progress the development, including preparation of all necessary paperwork for building and plumbing approval, and having actually obtained building approval. It's on this basis that it's recommended that the requested extension to the 14th of June next year be approved.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions? No? All good?
Councillors, item K5 relates to a request to extend completion date for under a Building Bundaberg Region 2020 Incentives Infrastructure Agreement. This time it relates, sorry, it's not an extension. Sorry, I was in the zone there for a second. Sorry, this request is actually to apply the Building Bundaberg 2020 Incentives discounts to a development at 11 Cullen Street, Walkervale. This development, which is for a dual occupancy, was originally refused under delegated authority by Council on 30th of July 2021, by Council's delegate. Subsequently to that decision, the applicant appealed the refusal to the Development Tribunal, and finally, on 19th of April this year, the Tribunal made a decision on that appeal, setting aside Council's decision to refuse and approved the development subject to conditions. The owners of 11 Cullen Street, who had applied for the incentives prior to the cut-off date on the 15th of June last year, have now written to council requesting the application of the incentives to their development, which would be 50% of the applicable infrastructure charge under the category of other eligible development that was in force at the time. Councillors, I know this incentives program has been closed for applications for some time, and was originally envisaged that actually incentivised developments would be being finalised by now. Despite this though, I think in support of the request there's some key points. Firstly, the application was lodged within the required time, and under the published material issued by council, the requirement was to lodge your application by the 30th of June, which they achieved. The development would have been eligible under the incentives program at the time, under that other eligible development category. But for the council's refusal of their application, the owner would have had their incentive application approved and would have been able to take advantage of the incentives. And a refusal to apply the incentives now is likely to raise questions of natural justice, in that the owners would have been denied the benefits of the policy that were applicable to others. Taking into account those individual circumstances, it is recommended that the council approve this development to be incentivised under the Bundaberg 2020 Building Bundaberg Region 2020 Incentive Scheme.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions on that one? No? All good?
Councillors, item K6 relates to a request to extend a completion date under a Bundaberg Open for Development 2016 Incentives Infrastructure Agreement. This agreement relates to a development for 10 residential units at 52 Heap Street at Avenel Heights. This development was originally approved for incentives, for the incentives available under the former incentives program in August 2016, and that agreement provided a 50% discount to the infrastructure charges applicable to development. The original completion date for this development was 19th of July 2018. However, through various mechanisms, the current completion date applicable to development is 26th of June of this year. To date, no works have commenced on the site and no further approvals have been obtained for the development. The owner has made a request that the completion date be extended to 26th of June 2023. Because the development hasn't achieved substantial commencement, this matter is brought for council for its consideration. In seeking the request, the owners advised that the extension is needed due to the lead times for construction and suggests that the incentives will help provide additional housing that will address current housing needs within our region. A copy of that request is attached to the report for your information. Councillors, although the owner has not provided a detailed explanation of why a third extension is sought, as has been mentioned on the previous items, the construction development industry is experiencing significant delays at the moment due to availability of consultants, contractors and building materials, and no doubt those impacts would also make progressing this development more difficult. It's on that basis that it's recommended that the agreement be extended for a further 12 months to 2023.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions on that one? Councillor Mitchell.
I just am surprised at the recommendation, actually, because there doesn't seem to be any real intention to have commenced that development since it's been on the go since 2016, and the whole point of incentives is to get development happening. So I am surprised at that recommendation because there's no real evidence of an intent to build. Thank you.
Are you surprised at that recommendation, Councillor Mitchell, or you have an alternate view?
I'm just surprised without, as the other matters have either had significant evidence of them starting or wanting to start, things like that. This particular development doesn't seem to be as advanced.
All right, thanks. Any other questions?
Quick question.
Councillor McPhee.
If that property is sold, Michael, does the infrastructure agreement is with the current owners of the property? Can that be transferred, or is that?
Councillor, under the provisions of the Planning Act, the infrastructure agreement continues to run with the land. However, there is a requirement in the infrastructure agreement that prior to any sale, that the council's required to give its approval to novate the agreement to the new purchasers.
Yeah.
And that provision's in there purely to allow the council to understand who it's entering into an infrastructure agreement with and make a determination if circumstances warrant whether to proceed or not.
Thank you.
And we had a recent example of that with the shopping centre at Kepnock,
Yeah.
where the agreement was assigned to a new owner. Any other questions on K6? No. K7 is back for this one.
Councillors, pleasingly this is a report about something other than infrastructure agreement, although
Can we just
ultimately doesn't.
clarify whether the mayor's coming back for this one? He said he was out for
All the Ks.
all the Ks. I don't know if he meant the same ones Councillor Honour was out for or not. Can you just clarify that with him, Gab? All the Ks. Thank you.
Councillors, as you may recall, at the ordinary meeting of 27th of July, Council considered a report from officers about the proposed acquisition of part of Mountney Street Park by the owner and developer of Spring Lakes Resort. As reported at that time, the developer originally had approached Council in 2020 about this proposal, and if successful in purchasing part of the park from the state, it intends to incorporate the land into their development and then make a subsequent change to their existing approval to reflect that. The council resolves in that meeting to provide is to conditionally support the proposal on the grounds that the developer is responsible for all necessary approvals and permits related to this proposal, as well as any costs associated with that the council be compensated for the loss of infrastructure contributions to the amount of $76,000, and that amount either be paid to council for trunk infrastructure or spent on embellishments to the park in accordance with a plan approved by council. The developer undertake community consultation, and the developer undertake community consultation satisfactory to the council before the proposal before any formal agreement is made. So since that resolution, the proponent has taken action in relation to item 3 of the council's previous resolution and undertook public consultation of their proposal between 11th of March and 8th of April this year. I think the proponent, as one of the attachments, provide a copy of all their consultation material, but consultation effectively consisted of undertaking a mailbox drop within a certain radius of Mountney Street Park, placing a public notice on the land, and then providing further information via a dedicated phone line, as well as having copies of information available at council offices. 4 submissions were received during that notification period from 3 submitters. and I've included a copy of there's a copy of the redacted submissions here attached to the report. Some of the things, matters raised in those submissions were that the Mountney Street Park is the only flood-free park in Avoca, that the transfer of land was not in the to public land to the private interest was not in the public interest, that the embellishment of the park should have been done by council, the proposed embellishments are inadequate or insufficient, and should include more facilities. There was no prior consultation. The land value is in excess of the proposed embellishments. There was an agreement with the proposal, although we'd like to see additional facilities. Another submitter is concerned about traffic impacts on Mountney Street, concerns about the impacts of rubbish, and would like to see increased access to the river via Fernie Avenue Park. Council, I'll provide a commentary in response to all of those grounds of submission. After having considered those, I believe there is an appropriate response to those things, noting that ultimately the decision to sell the land is not council's to make. That is a process which the proponent will need to go through with the state, and ultimately the land would have to be purchased at market rate. The embellishment of the park is not the only return to the community if this matter proceeds. Considering all those factors, council, my recommendation to you today is that the proponent, who has asked for a letter of support following consultation, be advised that we would provide them a letter of support, subject to them preparing and entering into an infrastructure agreement that ensures that the developer is responsible for all the approvals and all the costs associated with that, and that in the event that the transfer of land is successful, that the proponents carry out the embellishment works as shown on the plans that are attached to the report, and that a 1 metre high vanguard tubular fence be provided with the common boundary between the new common boundary between the park and the development site.
Thanks, Michael. Comments or questions? Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I think most council recall we actually went to look at the park on that this was first measured. Michael, I agree with your comments, and I think I just wanted to remind the councillors that they have issues.
Thanks, Councillor Cooper. Any other comments, questions? No? All good? Thank you, Michael. Very extensive. We'll get the Mayor back.
Yeah, I didn't have any confidence, I just had a coughing fit.
I think we all heard that.
I thought you said you'd gone out for a coffee.
All right, I'll move on to
Disrupting the meeting.
item 01. He's good. Christine, back again.
01 is in relation to a renewal of lease area BA at the airport. Council's the owner of the freehold land, which is the Bundaberg Regional Airport. Council had previously entered into a lease with Shell Company, and since that time it has been assigned a couple of times, and the lease is currently held at the moment with BP Australia Proprietary Limited. The lease is due to expire on the 30th of June 2022. BP would like to renew their lease. It's proposed that the initial term of the lease be for 5 years with one additional option period of 5 years. Rent will be for market rent, and the lease terms are proposed to be as council standard airport lease. It's proposed that council apply the exception contained in section 2361C3 of the local government regulation, given that it's a renewal of a lease to an existing tenant, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a lease with BP Australia for part of the airport land, being lease area BA, for an initial term of 5 years with a further 5-year option.
Thanks, Chris. Comments or questions? No? All good? Oh, okay. Sorry, yes, thank you.
Councillors, the next item is O2, which is in relation to a lease renewal to Community Lifestyle Support Limited, which is at School Lane, Windermere. This is state-owned reserve for recreation, which Council is the trustee of. Community Lifestyle Support currently have a lease which is due to expire on the 30th of June 2022. They would like to renew their lease for a further term of 10 years. Rent will be at market rent value, and the tenant is proposed to be responsible for 100% of their outgoings. Councillors will probably recall that Community Lifestyle Support had agreed to surrender their lease area and enter into a new lease when we tried to house the Lions Club of Bergara with part of their unused lease area. However, given that the Lions Club chose to not proceed with their lease area, Community Lifestyle Support would like to enter into the new renewed lease with the unchanged lease area. It's proposed that Council rescind the resolution made previously in relation to the surrender and change of lease areas, which was made on the 15th of December 2021, and then Council apply the exception contained in section 2361C3 of the Local Government Regulation, and that the CEO be authorised to enter into a 10-year lease with Community Lifestyle Support Limited for part of that reserve lot.
Thanks, Christine. Comments or questions? All good? Thanks. Then we move on to some financial assistance for some sporting events. Gav? Mitchell's back.
Well, dealing with item R1, which is a request from Bergara Golf Club for council support of the Bergara Legends Pro-Am for 2022. So just a bit of background, councillors. Last year was the first year that we had been approached by the Bergara Golf Club for the same event, requesting sponsorship. At that point in time, they'd already filled up their platinum and gold sponsors and offered a silver sponsorship to council last year. Council took up that offer. I think it was about $900 that council supported. This year we've had a similar request, but there are gold level sponsorships available, so we've been offered a gold level sponsorship. That's $1,950. The event runs over 2 days in July, kicking off the 12th and 13th, and there is a sponsors day that happens before that. They expect, as they have previously, as the majority of the players will be from outside of the region. They get a number of former golf champions and legends who come along to this as part of the tour, playing these pro-ams, so they're expecting there'll be a significant visitation from outside the region. And have offered the opportunity for council to be a gold sponsor. So the recommendation in the report is that we would take that up. There just needs to be a correction. I think in the recommendation it did say 1950 plus GST, but it's that 1950 actually includes GST. So happy to take any questions if there are any.
Councillor Barnes. Then Councillor McPhee, sorry.
Sorry, can we just scroll back up a bit, please? Okay, thank you. So the second dot point there, does that compromise us at all?
With a lot of our partnerships and sponsorships, we either get tickets or tables as part of that package. So it's if you decide to take that up, that's part of what they offer, and that's the standard for anyone who would take up that sponsorship. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not picking on this event.
Sure.
But I've also thought in the past, like, we were offered free admission or free tickets or whatever else, how that actually plays out, whether or not it compromises us or whether we should maybe look at it in the policy document as a CEO.
I think the CEO will probably answer to say that we already have a gifts register, so if anyone were to take that up, like an employee or a council, that would have to be registered, the value of it, on as a gift register, so be correct.
That's correct, and on other occasions we've given those tickets away to community groups or by way of competition. So I understand what you're saying, but I think that from a probity perspective at the moment, whenever we get those sort of arrangements in place, we have that well and truly covered.
I apologise for raising it, but it's something that's over the years played on the back of my mind.
Councillor McPhee, did you have a question?
Thank you. I was just wondering, why is this under the partnerships and sponsorships and not the sports championship funding?
It's a couple of issues. One, timing, and two, because effectively we'd be putting out, and the idea, because it's a sponsorship package, which is something they put forward, there's signage, and I think part of that agreement is that we get sponsorship up there for a year. So it's a little bit different than just supporting this individual event. It's an ongoing, I think there's a 12-month obligation as part of that agreement, so permanent signage for 12 months on one of the tees. So.
And I thought that if it was under $2,000, or is it under $5,000, it could be approved by delegation?
Sponsorships, we tend to bring them to council because it is a sponsorship. We involve our marketing and provide, usually if it's just a grant, then it usually just gets done by the committee.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Any other questions? No? All good on that one?
Next item is R2. Netball Queensland financial support for the 2022 Primary Schools Cup. Councillors be aware that there was a briefing provided to this at a consultation day by Dave Field. Effectively, Netball Queensland are proposing to have their netball carnival for the Primary Schools Cup, which is for primary school aged children. Runs over 2 days in September. They're expecting about 2,000 attendees. That includes both participants, officials and umpires. The last time Council hosted this was back in 2018, and the recommendation is that we would provide $15,000 in financial support towards this event. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Haberman.
Gavin, just with the issues that are being raised this week now, with the athletics club having their big spring carnival on that same weekend, does that need to be, is there any extra logistics, or does anything need to be considered in conjunction with this motion, or will that be addressed separately?
You, Mr. CEO, I think it's happened, remembering that they had moved it once because there was a clash with something else, this netball. I think they'll just work that out between them at the particular site. So they're locked in for this. Obviously, got to happen during school holiday period. They're limited time as they can do that during school holidays. They've already moved it from one weekend or one date to another to accommodate a potential clash already that was going to be of concern. I think they're aware of it, and the fact that they're located at a similar site, I think they'll be able to resolve it. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Gav. Any other questions? No? All good. Thank you. No late items? No? That concludes the briefing meeting. Thank you, everybody, and we'll tune off.